Are high-efficiency loudspeakers the way to go? This question is very similar to the one we had yesterday, but I'm going to go a little bit more into depth today. And it comes from Ricardo in Portugal. Hey, Ricardo. Thanks for writing, man. Is it always preferable to buy a high-sensitivity loudspeaker? My Amphions, which are great speakers, by the way, out of, I think they're somewhere in Scandinavia, they're Argon 3Ls and they're 87 dB. They sound great, but can you tell me what your threshold of a high sensitivity loudspeaker is? And why don't every loudspeaker company, why don't they build sensitive speakers instead of building some that can have, say, 85 dB or so? Well, that's a really good question. And I think the answer lies in the system of compromises that designers have to make. So, you know, when I first got into engineering some 40-something years ago, 45, 50 years ago, I think, I was a starry-eyed kid thinking, I'm going to learn all this engineering and electronic stuff, and I'm going to build perfect products. I'm going to make products that no one's ever made, and they're going to be perfect. And what you wind up learning as an engineer is that engineering is a series of compromises. And as engineers, we choose the fewest compromises that we can manage. There are no such things as perfect products or solutions. They just don't exist. And I know I'm going to get the hair on the back of a whole bunch of people's necks. Live with it, okay? I mean, I make sweeping proclamations all the time, and my wife says, you know what? You're right about 50% of the time, but these proclamations that I make are based in fact and in truth, okay? And forgive me, I do tend to get all the way over here, you know, I do that. And I do it to make a point. So as we get to know each other over these many videos, you'll hopefully give me a little bit of leeway because I do tend to slam to one side or the other. But the fact is, if I can temper this nicely, most of engineering, pretty much all that we do, is compromise based. I don't want that to sound like all the products that we make are compromised and that they're not really great products. They are. And other manufacturers and designers and engineers that make speakers, they too make great products that are perfect within the series of compromises that they had to make. But unfortunately, there's no perfect devices. There are no perfect drivers. There are no perfect cabinets. There are no perfect transistors and no perfect tubes. They don't exist. So as engineers, we do what we have to make the best set of compromises and design choices to produce products that together work in a spectacular fashion. When we design drivers, we'd like them to be as efficient as possible. Why? Well, because the more efficient a loudspeaker is, the easier it is for amplifiers to drive it, even big amplifiers. The greater chance you will have of dynamic range contrasts, even from small to medium amplifiers that approach concert levels. An orchestra can reach 120, 130 dB. A rock band, very loud. Very few of our home speakers can reach those levels without distortion. But efficient speakers have a much better chance of actually reproducing proper dynamic contrast, which is what we would hope to do. Having said that, the motor structure within a driver is compromised. It's not perfect. As you remember, we have what we call a motor structure, which is a coil of wire called a voice coil attached to a woofer, which is sort of a cone-shaped, funnel-shaped piston that moves the air, and that voice coil is inside of a permanent magnet. And when we apply power to the voice coil, it becomes an electromagnet, pushing it away from the permanent magnet and pulling it towards the permanent magnet. Now, in order to make something efficient, you have to have a couple of things. One, a very powerful permanent magnet. The more powerful the permanent magnet, the better chance you have of using less power in order to move that driver. Also, how the voice coil is constructed has a lot to do with the efficiency. For every watt that goes into your voice coil, how big is the magnetic field that comes out of it, and all of those kind of parameters. And as we try to go to the edges and the extremes of what is possible within magnetic motor structures, other things start to fall off to the edges. Performance aspects fall off to the edges. So, and it's obvious that that happens, because if it didn't, then you'd have super efficient speakers that were all range without any kind of compromises. And of course, that isn't true. So we have to blend the practical realities of motor designs within drivers and cabinet constraints and cost constraints to make this stuff work. Now, one last thing let me say about this. Years ago, because there weren't high efficiency drivers readily available, we used what we called a horn. Now, a horn is like this, and it's an acoustic amplifier. So if we couldn't get the efficiency with our amplifiers and our drivers, or our combination of amplifiers and drivers, then we could supplement the efficiency of the speaker by adding an acoustic amplifier, again, a horn. So, to sum it all up, I am always in favor of high efficiency loudspeakers. And if you can make one, it's very high efficiency without too many compromises, that's the way to go. So just pay attention to what compromises have been made in sound quality, frequency extension, and flatness of the curve. And I think you'll be okay. Great question. Thank you. Bye.